Hey guys, welcome to another video. My name is Jake from Cryonaut Media and Cryosion, and I'll be using Ableton Live 10's beta today. So if you've been following along with the news, you'll see that there's a couple new devices that they've added in this version. I'm going to be going over one of them coming right up. So if you've watched the previous videos in this series already, then you'll have seen the three audio effect devices already, the drum bus, the pedal, and the echo devices. And in the last video, we started going over the Wavetable synth. Now, this is a super powerful synth, and once you bring it up to this view, you have all the options laid in front of you. It looks a lot like Serum. So in the previous video, we went over the oscillators and the modulation sources up here. In today's video, I want to go over the last couple sections down here, which is the filter and the really powerful mod matrix over here, as well as a couple other options down here. So starting off with the filter, you have two different poles you can choose from, and you can choose different types on each of them, as well as the slope, 12 or 24 decibels. And then you can choose the kind of filter circuit here if you want to have some drive to each one. And these are the same as the other filters in auto filter and wherever else you can find these things. They basically emulate older circuits and give you a little bit more of that analog kind of a sound. So depending on what kind of sound you're going for, this can be really cool. So for each one, you have the resonance knob and the frequency knob. Now this may seem a little odd because this left control controls the one on the right and the right on the left, but that's okay. You can always change it if you wanted to. And now it's back to the other way. It's up to you how you want to do this. So pretty standard though, your filter cutoff, basically where it's going to start taking effect, and the resonance. Now what's interesting is you can have your filter routing down here be serial, parallel, or split. So serial just means that filter 1 is going to take its output and go into filter 2, and the output of that is going to go out. So you kind of have double filtering going on there. Parallel just means that you have filter 1 and 2 going separately, and so all of your oscillators up there, the sub, oscillator 1 and 2, is going to go to each filter, half to filter 1, half to filter 2, and they're going to be combined that way. Lastly, you have split, which means oscillator 1 goes to filter 1, and oscillator 2 goes to filter 2, which can give you a lot more control if you have two very different kind of waveforms up here, and you just wanted to have them controlled differently. So again, multiple options is nice. The fact that you have two different filters you can use is great. Serum does not, it only has the one. So I like that option. Now moving over to the mod matrix, this can be very intimidating to some people if you've never seen anything like this. I'm okay with it. I do like how Serum is very easy to use. You just click and drag on something and you know that, okay, this LFO is now going to be controlling the volume of this. Really simple. This is a little bit cleaner and doesn't take as much work on the back end to make it work. So it's a lot lighter on the CPU because it's just this little graph. Now, it can be confusing, and if you aren't really sure how to use it, you may try to, shy away from it, but it's okay. It's not that bad. So real quick, before we get into that, down here, there's the time and the amount, which will affect everything in here. So time is basically how long, it's sort of like the attack on the LFO, how long it takes for this stuff to come into play. And the amount is the overall amount that this stuff will affect the sound for everything in here. So again, we have amount on the LFO, how much the original sound is going to be affected by the LFO. Down here, this amount covers everything, how much any modulation at all will affect its sound. Now, how this works, you start off with the oscillator 1 position, which is right here, as well as the amp and the pitch. So the volume and the pitch for your overall sound. And you would pick what you want to modulate that with. So let's say LFO 1. We want to modulate the pitch with that. So you find LFO 1, go down to the pitch, and bring that up. So at 100%, you're going to be modulating the pitch at the full range that it can go. So for pitch, that is a huge range, and this is probably not going to sound good. But just as an example, this is what that does. I mean, you're trying to play a melody with that, it's not going to work. But you can get some interesting effects doing it this way. So now if we get rid of that, maybe we want to have the LFO affect the frequency over here. Well, that's not in the matrix. So what you need to do is click on it, and then it shows up. Now, if you click on something else, without setting that parameter, it replaces it with the next thing that you click. So let's say we want to do the filter 1 frequency. Let's bring this up to maybe 36 is good. And then let's see how that affects it. First of all, let's switch this back. So this LFO is going to be modulating the filter cutoff here by about 36%, let's say. So the top end is going to be where it's set to now, and then it's going to go down from there, 36%. So if you leave this all the way open and then play a note, it's barely going to be noticeable. If you bring it all the way down, it's again almost no sound because there's very little time that it's actually active. So find the sweet spot in the middle, and that's going to be probably the best sound that you want. Again, if we bring this up to 100, it's going here all the way down, all the way up and down. And because the rate is fairly fast, it kind of sounds like off and on almost. It's not as gradual. So usually moderation is going to be key for something like this. Now, let's say you also wanted to modulate filter 2's position. Let's turn it on. Filter 2's position. Now we have another one. So you can modulate that. And also the volume. Let's get LFO 2 in there. So you can also control these things over here. So we have some glide. Maybe we can get some glide on an LFO. That should be interesting. We'll choose the shimmer. Okay, so you can't change the voices by modulation, but you can choose the amount. So you can see we have quite a few things already. We can get the sustain going. So you can just get a lot of different options. Now, real quick, these are color coded. So the blue ones are the amp and envelopes over here. Yellow are the 2 LFOs, and then green is all your MIDI stuff. So let's hear how all this sounds with these crazy parameters set. So you can get very complex sounds by using all of this mod matrix stuff down here. It's a little bit counterintuitive maybe, or it's not as easy as other synths, but once you get the hang of it, you can do so much with this stuff. And you have just as many options as you do in Serum, because these LFOs can control everything, or only 1 or 2 things if you want. It's totally up to you. So again, just a quick overview. The blue ones here are the same as the envelopes up here. LFO is our yellow, and then green is the MIDI controls. So if we get rid of all these, you have these different settings, which sometimes people overlook, or they're kind of hidden in the menus and you don't know about them, but they're actually really powerful. So you have velocity, note, pitch bend, aftertouch, and the mod wheel. So if you actually have a physical MIDI keyboard and you have a mod wheel, you can use that for how much that mod wheel is going to affect whatever you choose, the filter frequency or the oscillator position. Velocity is how hard you hit the key. So if we set that to the oscillator 2 position, if we just barely touch it, the harder we hit it, you can see it move up there. So velocity, if you're going to actually be playing the keyboard, you can use that a lot. If not, you can always draw in the velocity, and that can be helpful. Note is basically how high or low of a note that you're playing. So if you play like a C1, you could maybe have the filter cutoff be opened up all the way. And then as you play higher and higher up notes, the filter cutoff goes down, 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 or the other way around, or you can change the shape. So down low, it's maybe a saw wave, and then as you go up, it turns into a sine wave, something like that. Just so that your sound changes depending on higher or lower notes. So the pitch bend is basically controlling the pitch wheel on your actual MIDI keyboard. So we set this to the position. You can see I press a note. And then as I move that pitch wheel up, the pitch goes up, but because you can see it's set to here to 5, if I turn that off, it doesn't do anything anymore for the pitch. But the pitch wheel will just move whatever parameter you have set along with the pitch if you leave that. Now the mod wheel, real quick, is the same thing. It's just set to the different wheel, so the mod wheel. You can adjust things based on that. Now the difference between the pitch bend and mod wheel, the pitch bend will always go back to where it's set to. So you bring it up, it'll snap back down. You bring it down, it'll snap back up. The mod wheel you can adjust and leave wherever you want. So then also Aftertouch is kind of the same thing, only you don't actually get a wheel for it, like a pitch wheel or a mod wheel. But once you press a key, it'll start using whatever parameter you have set in the same way as if you had a mod wheel. Finally, we have this little section over here, which has the overall volume of the whole synth, whether you want it to be poly or monophonic. If you have it set to poly, you can choose anywhere from 2 to 8 voices. 1 would be mono, so that's why you'd switch that over. The glide section will only work if the synth is in mono. And then basically this is how long each note takes to shift to the next one. So now keep in mind you have to actually be holding, like the notes have to overlap. You can't just push a note. You can't push it and stop and go to the next one. The glide won't do anything. And then lastly, we have the unison down here. So there's all these different unison modes, which all have a different kind of character to them. And then you can choose how many voices you want. So for right now we have 2 up to 8. Let's turn this back on for a little bit more high-end content. Oh yeah. And then down here, the amount is how much of this sound is going to be kind of detuned. So if you keep it down very low, you have all the voices that are playing almost the same notes, just a little bit off. Bring up to 100%, and all of a sudden the tuning is just way all over the place. And then as you bring it down to around 20 or 30, it's usually a pretty good spot for detune. You have a detuned sound, but it's not too far out of tune that it just sounds bad. So that is pretty much all the different parts of the new Wavetable synth. Go ahead and leave a like down below, leave a comment, letting me know what you like about this synth or what you don't, what you think is missing from it. And I'm going to be making another video comparing this one to Serum to see what the differences are, as well as the CPU usage, which one wins in that battle, because that makes a big difference for people, especially if you don't have a really powerful computer. The CPU usage can make a big difference. So thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.